And today's topic is all about being a challenger. And here's the thing, the best leaders do not simply move past an obstacles, right? They spend time on it, they find meaning in it, and they use it to their advantage. And our standout guest today, Anna Dewar, is the co-CEO and co-founder of Tidal Equality. During our conversation, she's going to share how she breaks the mold of conformity by challenging the world's most influential organizations to embrace equitable innovation to build a just future for all. So please help me welcome Anna to the Stand Up podcast.
Thank you so much, Doreen. It's so awesome to be here. And so I'm excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much. And this is going to be a great conversation because today we are the challengers. And as a challenger myself, I always thought and feel like I was the black sheep, the weirdo. But today we are going to talk about how, you can cultivate a challenger mindset. Why is it important and how it can impact your personal and your professional life. But let's get started with you because this is all about you. If I would ask your friends, family members to describe you using 3 words, what would that be?
Well, I would say the 3 words would probably be kind first, because I think I live with my heart on my sleeve all the time, probably to a fault. I would say, I would hope maybe brave would be one of those words, because, being a challenger, I think is really part of my personality. And that has meant standing up to powerful people in the course of my life, and sometimes even in my own family, and saying like what I feel to be true. So brave might be the second word. And I think curious would be the last word, because I feel like I never want to stop learning. I always feel like I'm new, and that I'm fresh and I want to know more. And so for me, like curiosity is probably the biggest driving force in my personality. And in fact, it's probably the driving force for my challenge kind of personality as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so talking about curiosity, and I agree with you. I do believe, being curious is very important because this is what pushes you to learn more, to understand better, and to maybe take action on things that you feel like are not quite right, right? Curiosity is very essential. So now, can you tell us about a time when you face, let me get it right. What are some of the most significant challenges you faced while growing up?
Growing up, I would say it's funny because like a few different moments flashed through my mind to that question. I would say a feeling of non-belonging maybe was the overarching challenge. It probably like led me to my work. I don't know why, but I just always felt like I didn't quite fit. I didn't quite fit any mold. I was enormously tall at a very young age. I was a Jewish person raised in a Jewish tradition, but I came from a mixed marriage. So I didn't kind of fully fit in the Jewish community, or I didn't always feel like I fit, even if I did fit. I would say like that, the challenge that I faced was that feeling of, do I belong? And like, should I be here? And what value can I bring? And so I would say like in my childhood, I think I really struggled with a lot of insecurities. It's funny because I think if you knew me as a child, you wouldn't have known that, but that was what it was for me. So insecurities and also a desire to be seen and heard. And so like an interesting combination of those things, were, I would think, driving forces in my childhood. Yeah.
So, would you qualify it as driving forces or would you qualify it as barriers or challenging to your own growth?
I would say I think for me, so I was a competitive athlete as a kid. And so for me, there's not really a difference between a barrier and something that drives me, if that makes any sense. And so I think most of the things that have motivated me in the world were actually barriers, and or things that I thought I might not yet be able to achieve, or things that I hadn't achieved yet. And I honestly think to this day, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I think I work in an area that's kind of like perpetual challenge, and it's all about barriers. And that also drives me, So When I was a kid, that might have looked like trying to win a swimming race, and having some really staunch competitors in front of me. It might have looked like feeling excluded or bullied and trying to figure out, how do I connect and how do I fit in? But like, for me, they're kind of two sides of the same coin, the barrier and the driver,
I like that. The barriers are not here to hold you back, but they are here to motivate you to overcome them. So, if I would that be right if I say that your way of overcoming those challenges is just to address them and leverage them as a motivation?
Yeah. And I think I don't know if I clearly did not know this about myself as a kid, but I grew up to be a strategist, right? And what I've learned about being a strategist is that strategists are motivated by seeing a barrier and figuring a way around it, or seeing an opportunity and finding a way to it. And so I think that part of me is very deep in me, as in that motivation or that connection. Like when someone says to me, you cannot do something, like I have to, you know?
Yes.
So
Tell me I
yeah,
can't and I will show
yeah,
you.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's just part of my personality or my character for sure. Yeah.
Ooh, I love that. And I can see a lot of similarities between your personality and mine. And before we move further in the conversation, I would like to welcome the beautiful people joining us live. Thank you. So Padma Priya is here. Hello, welcome. Our friend and longtime supporter Marcello is here. Thank you for joining us, Marcello. We have some people from Canada. We have Mawash. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Mawash from Vaughan in Canada. Austin also joining from Toronto, and Ursula joining us from Luxembourg. I love that. We have a beautiful
Beautiful
international
global
community
community.
here.
Yeah.
You have built a career in the public sector, right? And when I think about public sector, one of the first few words that are coming to mind is conformity, right? And so I'm like, okay, how how do you evolve in a professional environment that is so far away from your personality, where you maybe feel like there is so much that you can do, but ultimately you are quite limited? How do you find the balance to be aligned with who you are while growing your career in an environment that might not be the most suitable for you?
Well, even that was an example of me being a challenger. So my dad, who was an incredible mentor to me, passed away in 2019. And at his
Oh.
funeral, in my speech at his funeral, I said, when I became a bureaucrat, it was the single greatest act of rebellion towards my father that I had in my life. Okay. And which was a joke, because my dad was a great entrepreneur, my mom, a journalist and also an entrepreneur. They were both self-made, self-created people that didn't like to work at institutions. And my dad found it to be the strangest curiosity of his life that his challenger daughter went to become a bureaucrat. And so it was kind of a family joke. Um, but it's funny. It made perfect sense and no sense at all being in the public sector. The perfect sense was, I've been a person that's kind of obsessed with the problem of inequality and of social justice and of wanting to be part of building a better society since I was a kid. And when I was a kid, they were much smaller words, but same ideas and feelings. And so it didn't make sense to me when I was in my early 20s to think about a world in the corporate world, or a career in the corporate world. I kind of thought, I need to be in the public sector, because where else am I going to work on kind of societal issues? But of course, you're 100% right. I was a complete wrong fit in so many ways in the public sector. I think I made it work for me that I was a wrong fit. And I think that's how ultimately I became a strategist. I started my career in public policy. I got really frustrated with public policy really fast. And the reason I
Yeah.
got frustrated with it was because I felt like in the policy world, people want you to work on things one file at a time. And without having the words for it at the time, I learned that I was a systems thinker, and like I couldn't work on one problem without working on many interconnected problems. And so as my career developed, I got more and more interested in strategy because I wanted to change the systems that I was working in. I wanted to speed them up. I wanted to get them to
Yeah.
do the things that they needed to do for people. And I needed to figure out ways to do that. So I sort of taught myself strategy. And then ultimately stepped into more strategic roles, and then ultimately like full-fledged strategy roles that weren't policy roles anymore. But even then, I didn't fit at
Yeah.
all. I was definitely a square peg in a round hole. And but I think it's like, I'm not sure that I would have fit in any kind of organizational environment. Like, I think the truth is, like, I just like my dad, I'm an entrepreneur, and I at the time I was an intrapreneur.
Yeah.
I thought of my job as being, how do I make these systems that I work in live their public mandates to the fullest, and how can I find a route there? And of course, there are a million barriers between me and that. So,
Oh, yeah,
right,
we know that.
right,
But
so, yeah.
would you say that the fact that you couldn't fit in anywhere is one of the reasons you decided to launch your own company?
Yeah, and I think yes, because I think it's for me. I think first of all, I've always had ideas about companies that I wanted to start, and none of them were interesting enough earlier in my career to actually make me take that leap. And it took a deep, deep frustration with my work, coupled with
Mm.
some family dynamics, my dad dying actually, or my dad gets, kind of starting that end journey, and, life that brought me to the place of being like, now is the time. But I think honestly, in every institution I worked in, I always knew that that wasn't going to be the end of my story.
Yeah.
I had a very deep knowing from a very early age that that would be the case.
So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about it. I usually qualify myself as being unemployable, right? Because of the same reasons. Wherever I go, I feel when I feel like I am limited, which is oftentimes the case, no matter if you work for a company or non-for-profit organization. Most of my experience is in the non-for-profit sector,
Mm.
but it's normal. You are limited to some extent because there is a workplace culture, there are the rules, there is the mandate, and all of those things that are normal that you have to follow. But for me, the fact, as soon as I know that I am limited in my capacity of action, in my capacity to create, my capacity to deliver, when we know, and you said it very rightly, that by being strategic and combining and having a multi-level approach, you could solve the problem, but that you can't. You can't, because you have to do step by step and one by one, when it takes 2 years to do to get an outcome that you could have achieved within 6 months, for example. So
Yeah.
that's why I decided to create my own company as well, so I could do me and provide the solutions to the issue I have identified in a way that I believe is more effective. So, but it takes a degree of self-awareness, a certain degree of self-awareness. And I feel, especially today's, and especially with the younger generation coming on the workforce now, into the market. So I'm a millennial now, Gen Z. They are like the majority of people employed in the workforce. And I feel like we are so used to be bombarded by messages from society, what is expected, from social media, what it should look like based
Mm.
on whoever standards, that we are losing that connection with ourselves, and that it becomes more and more difficult to be self-aware of who we are, what we were meant who we were meant to be, what are our strengths, our weaknesses, because we are trying to follow a model. We are trying to fit in, right, and to be
Yeah.
molded the way we are supposed to be molded in order to look good on people's eyes. So how did you develop that self-awareness, and what would you advise to the people listening and watching to us today, to do in order to develop that self-awareness?
So, I mean, that's an amazing question. And I'm the mother of two daughters, and watching them grow up and surrounded by social media is actually a really scary prospect for exactly that reason. I'm like, how can I help them connect into who they really are, not who they're supposed to be, is a big question that goes in my mind a lot. I would say for me, Two things. Number one is very personal to me. I describe myself as an empath. I feel emotions incredibly different, deeply. I feel energy really deeply. I feel other people's energy, not just my own, which is something I've kind of had to learn to deal with as a person who does work that can be quite heavy from time to time. And working in a world that can be quite heavy far too often. So for me, I think part of the knowing comes from my like intuition about myself, which I think has been strong since I was a very young person. And I'm not sure, because I think it goes back so deeply in my life experience, that I can like locate that to like a specific moment in time. I can just tell you that I kind of had a very strong sense of self from a very early age. And I
Mhm.
think some of that I have to credit my parents and my upbringing for, because my parents were really like contrarian humans. Like they really existed for their, and my mother continues to be a person who follows her curiosity and follows her interests, and pursues a life that's of interest and concern to her, And so I think they gave me this amazing model that you need to find those things in yourself, those things that kind of light you up. When I think about other people, and I've like over the years have had like, the joy of being able to like either mentor or guide friends or, colleagues or people that I've worked with, and sometimes just people that I've met. I always feel like the thing is, it's about finding those things that do actually just bring you absolute joy,
Yeah.
or that make you feel like you can never satiate the interest, even if you have zero skills, because where you have that level of drive, you have the motivation to build the skills, and so for me, like I've mostly spent my life following my curiosity and my interests, and built skills that were useful to helping me pursue those interests, which has kept me really connected to myself. And now obviously there have been many points in my life where I felt radically disconnected from myself, so it's not like always like a joyous story of a
Yeah.
person. There have been times, I mean, I've had jobs where I'm like, who the heck am I? Where am I? What is this? What am I
Yeah.
doing with my life? I've had
Mhm.
moments of huge impasse where I've been like, I don't know what's next or how, so it's not like but somewhere in there, I think there's been a kind of guiding voice or intuition
Yeah.
that's given me a clear sense of, am I in a place where my energy is growing and prospering, or am I in a place where my energy is dwindling and dying, to be
Yeah.
really crass about it. And so I think most of the major decisions I've made in my life and my career come from following the great energy versus following the dwindling energy, which actually it can be quite easy to do, right? Like there are times where you feel like it's your job to fix the dwindling energy
Yeah.
versus find the source of light. But I feel like I've been blessed with mentors in my life who have reminded me to follow that light, uplifted part of myself.
And it's very interesting what you're saying here, because it's hard to do it alone. It's hard to achieve it alone.
Mm,
That's why mentorship, you have been a mentor and you have mentioned also mentors being fundamental to you, discovering yourself and unleashing your full potential. And I want to remind everyone, that even when we say we are self-made, even when we project an image that is quite successful, right, especially on LinkedIn, uh, there are a couple of things that are important. First of all, of course, all of us, every single one of us, we avoid the lows, right? We avoid to be in trouble. We avoid to feel down. But
mm,
actually, it's through those moments that you will reveal yourself. I feel like it's when you have your back against the wall that
mm,
you like, what do I do? And you have no other choice at that point to listen to your gut feeling. And this gut feeling usually is the direction that you were meant to follow, but because of, again, social media, society, family expectation, a lot of different things, will choose voluntarily to ignore that inner voice and
mm,
to choose a path that is not our calling. So I can really resonate to what you were saying, because it's really in the worst moment or the most challenging moment, without
mm.
being dramatic here, but that, your inner self will reveal itself to you. I
Yeah.
don't know if it makes sense,
No,
but
I
that's
think
the
it does.
idea.
And I think if you actively listen, like I actually find, and this might sound strange, but in decision points in my life, I have found myself asking the question in my mind, which way do I go? You know? And I have tended to hear an answer, not like a literal answer, but like to have that sense of clarity when I voice the actual question, you know?
Yeah.
Which sometimes it's like I feel like it's not even about listening, it's about being afraid to ask the question in the first place, like should I go here or should I go there, should I do this or should I do that? So I feel like if you can just be brave enough to ask yourself the question, the answer is usually pretty plain.
Yeah, 100%. So now you have taken your challenger mindset and personality to from building a career to launching and building a business.
Mm.
And so what are the the main setback that you are facing when trying to challenging those big organizations? So maybe you can tell us what you do with your company Tidal, and then how you are challenging those big companies to make the change happen, because this is what it is about.
I would love to. So thank you. So my company is called Tidal Equality. And the reason we exist in the world is because I honestly feel like the problem of inequality is perhaps the greatest challenge for humanity of our time. And so I want to be part of solutions to the problem of inequality. And my co-founder, who I was blessed to meet early in my business journey, I went out on my own, left my day job, and I was like, I'm going to do the thing. And I was like, what the heck is the thing? And then I met my co-founder. I knew it had to do with inequality, but I didn't know what shape it would take. And actually, at first, it took a few different shapes before it became what it is today. But I think, you know, even when we started this business, and I really want to credit, it's like really two minds that made this business. I can't take all the credit for it. It's me and my co-founder, Kristen, and now we've got a beautiful team who are even better minds bringing it to life. But, you know, what we saw was a problem. And I feel like most great businesses start with a problem. And for me, it was a problem that I like really felt deeply when I was inside organizations. And that was that organizations just seem to be riddled with inequality, and they seem to have no viable solutions to solve any of those problems. And I got really curious about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really like confused about what it was trying to accomplish, because in the organizations that I worked in, there would be like one person, maybe two people in these huge systems who had the title of DEI leader. And yet they were like being expected to transform these enormous, complex, unwieldy systems, like with no teams, with no resources, and
Yeah.
oftentimes with no tools or solutions, you know, or the tools and solutions that they had, I didn't see making a difference in terms of the way people made decisions. Like, were they making those organizations more equitable, or were they just things that we tick boxes for, right? So like this business started with a kind of like, well, could we do that better? Could we do that differently? Is there a way to build equality better in organizations, which is really like the guiding question that Tidal Equality exists to try to answer. And what we realized is that actually that is holding a challenge function, because today, or we started in 2018, 2019, and back then, there were only like 2 or 3 ways that organizations did diversity, equity, and inclusion. They did unconscious or implicit bias training. They might have done cultural competency training, and they might have done some events and had some groups that got together and talked about affinity.
Yeah.
Um, and unfortunately, none of those things in and of themselves, or even as a group, were driving true change in terms of
Mhm.
the way organizations made decisions for the people that they touch, whether that's employees or customers or patients or other forms of stakeholders or whatever. So in a way, we started our business and inadvertently began to challenge the DEI industry and to say, like, does this work? And like, is this the way we should be doing this? And we started to challenge companies to be saying, like, is this what you should be spending your money on? Or is there a different way to think about how do we make change? And so we ultimately came up with 2 new methodologies in this space that came from utter frustration, which honestly is where the best business ideas come from
Yeah.
you being truly pissed off with the way the world is and trying to find a way to respond and to fix it. And so, you know, but that does that get immediately embraced? No.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't think
People
so.
get really mad at you first. Yeah. right? The people that we upset an industry at first. Like we were like a literal disruptor, because we came in with a different approach, a different way of, and we said there's a problem with the way we're trying to solve these problems, right? So I remember at the very beginning, I mean, that incurred really not very favorable responses. In fact, some very difficult responses. And there were many, many moments that you asked about, like, what are the hardships that you faced in that? There were moments where I had major wobbles and I was like, I can't do this, like I'm not brave enough and I'm not sure I can withstand the scrutiny. And I have had moments like that in the last 2 weeks, like literally, like those moments don't go away, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to challenge what is, you're going to meet resistance. Resistance is like the foe of all change and of all change makers, and I'm sure you face it all the time, Doreen, too, okay, like we had a little brief, conversation about, but resistance is a constant.
Yeah.
People don't invite you to be a disruptor, right? You
And
have
they
to,
don't like it.
no,
They don't
exactly.
invite you
You
and they
invite
don't like it.
you have to invite yourself. And then, as my dad used to say, if you're going to do something that really matters, you have to piss a few people off,
Yeah.
right? So, that's really the way I see the work. So I would say there are barriers literally every day and every week. And like I said at the beginning, that's what inspires me and gets me up in the morning. I mean, once in a while, I kind of want to pull my duvet over my head and call it quits, but mostly I get up and try again.
Yeah, we know that feeling too well, actually.
Yeah.
And so, as you said, when you are the challenger, you are not invited. We don't like you. We don't want you. We don't hear about you. And I feel there was this status quo, when it comes to DAI, where those big companies, they made this big announcement about, pouring that much money into DEI initiatives. Inefficient and non-effective DEI initiatives, I want to say, and I
Mm.
want to say it out loud. And also those companies who believed that, yes, you hire one or two people from a diverse background, so we are
And
all
we're
about
done. We're
equity,
done.
equality,
Inequality doesn't exist
we're
anymore. Magic. Right.
yes,
Exactly.
we are good.
Yeah.
And I feel like there was this status quo where you couldn't challenge them at some point, where DEI became trending,
Mm.
when it built the momentum, because, but you cannot challenge an organization that is trying to do good, right? But wanting to do good, as you said, if you're not equipped, if you don't have the right tools, if you don't have the right strategy, the right approach, it's useless. And so, what are some of the, if you are willing to share with us, of course,
Mm.
some of the most harsh or negative response setback that you received from those big companies when trying to challenge them?
I think what I've learned is that, and so I'm thinking, I'm not obviously not going to talk about these environments, but I can think of two client experiences in particular where I faced like incredibly steep resistance. Leaders who just, they refused to look under the hood. What they wanted from me was to bless them and say, "You're wonderful. Have a nice time. You get a gold star." And I don't work like that. I'm like so interested in problems, right? So, and every organization of any scale has equity problems, and they should be exciting your organization, not something that you should hide. Like, I think the most equitable organizations are aware that they are constantly becoming more equitable by trying to spot those problems and fix them. But in these two really difficult jobs, I think what I realized was the tension, between, appearances or maintaining them, and maintaining curiosity as a discipline in an organization. So if you're going to become an equitable organization, you have to challenge yourself to be the most curious about where are problems of inequality showing up today, and where could we fix them, and how could we fix them, right? If
Yeah.
you're going to be a PR engine saying you're doing stuff, then you won't allow anyone to ask those questions. And for me, my clients today, I focus on serving those curious organizations, because I can't do much with the PR oriented organizations,
Yeah.
right? Questions are always going to make an organization that thinks it's smartest to try to fool your audience, right? that's never going to work for them, right? But
Yeah.
I put my money on organizations that are curious about the people they serve and are curious about the people who serve them as in employees and who want to know how to get things out of those people's way so that they can thrive, right? To me, that's actually what makes a great commercially successful organization or a relevant public sector organization that's actually living its mandate. And so the system that we invented, which is called equity sequence, is actually a system of equitable innovation, a system of 5 questions. And so no accident that they're questions, not answers. It's a discipline of curiosity that you can bring to any decision an organization makes. So, and I think of the challenging environments, were environments where the resistance was, I don't want you to ask your questions. And I do not want to hear your answers or my people's answers or my customers' answers. I just want to say what is. And if you want to be that kind of organization or leader, like have at it. But if you want to build a more equitable world, if you want to see better products and services that serve more people better, then that curiosity is something that you cannot just stop after you make a statement, right? It needs to be something that lives in perpetuity in an organization.
But would you say that it's a lack of humility, maybe arrogance? Like, what is
Sometimes
the
all
word?
of the above. I would say
Yeah.
fear. Actually, I would say unbridled fear that they might be wrong, right? So like I try
Mm,
to like create an environment with my clients and we're getting better as a business is find clients that resonate with what we do. It takes time to do that. It doesn't happen overnight and it's not done yet. We're still on
yeah.
that journey, right? But what I will say is that when you have a really resistant response of any kind, what tends to drive that is not knowing what's around the corner, right? So it's
Mhm.
like wanting to like clamp down the risk that we might have to change the way we do things. And what people in an organization, especially leaders, can sometimes feel about that is if we change how we do things, will I still be valuable here? Will I still be relevant here? Right?
True.
That's the
Mhm.
question that it elicits in people. It doesn't come out overtly, but that's like the question under the surface, right? So in those environments where I've had a really difficult client interaction, what I hear is I am terrified, right?
Mhm.
But what they project is often arrogance or a lack of humility or an all knowing, right? But I kind of always see those as masks for
Yeah.
what's really underneath, you know?
That's great. You are being able to, you have developed this capacity to read between the lines. And I believe that what will make you even more efficient in your work. So we are coming to the end of this conversation. One last question. When looking back at your journey, what advice would you give your younger self?
So I often say to clients and friends, never make change alone. I call that my number one rule of making change. And I would say for the better part of the first 12 years of my career, I tried to do it alone a lot.
Yeah.
So um, I hurled myself into brick walls with no scaffolding or whatever the right metaphor is, but I just kept going, right? Now
Yeah.
the brute force will make change,
Yeah.
right? What I learned as I got older and more experienced, like I didn't go into business for myself until I was 38. So I had, a pretty long public sector career before I went into business. It took me a long time to learn how important it is to start by building allies and then shaping a vision together before trying to go into that stiff resistance. So that's something that I teach in my work now. It's something that I live in my work now. And of course, from time to time, I forget it and remember it. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Hello. Practice what you preach. Don't forget.
Right? I mean, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, right. But I mean, that's what I would say to myself. You don't have to do the whole lift. You only really need to make a ripple, that ripple can lead to an enormous change. And you need to find other people that can make those ripples with you. And if you don't have them yet, take the time to find them.
Yeah, very important. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story with us today. I will see you next week for another episode of Stand Out from the Crowd. You take care, you stay safe, and I will see you soon. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, everyone. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
Doreen. Great to see you. Bye.